So, folks, there is this guy named Michael Knowles. You might have heard of him before. And it turns out sometimes he is actually let out of the Daily Wire studio to interact with other people. I know that sounds kind of crazy, like that they allow him to interact with others because he seems so deranged and frankly demonic. But he went on the show Counterpoints with Ryan and Emily, which features Emily, a conservative, and I don't really know her history, and Ryan Grimm, one of the best working journalists in the business right now. And I have no idea how they got paired up together, but I am grateful because it allows us to have this incredible interaction between Michael Knowles and Ryan Grimm, and frankly, Ryan knows his stuff. Let's dive in. I have no doubts. I haven't seen any of this, but I have no doubts in Ryan Grimm's ability to handle Michael Knowles. Let's go.
Election. What do you think went wrong?
How is it possible that Biden could get 10 million more votes in 2020 than Democrats had done in 2016? One answer to that is, well, because all the rules changed. So, you know, you got a new game and you've got new results as a consequence of that.
I would just point out, so I was down in D.C. on January 21st, 2017, covering the Women's March. Something like 5 million people, most of them women, came out and marched that day against Donald Trump. Continue with a historically inaccurate analysis, and you're going to have an improper kind of strategy out of it.
I'm sorry. The slow zoom on Michael Knowles got me here.
Accurate analysis, and you're going to have an improper kind of strategy out of it.
All right, welcome to Counterpoints Friday. We're now about a week and a half away from the November election, and Ryan and I are joined today by Michael Knowles, the host of...
Just real quick before we get too deep, how are the audio levels? Because I don't have really a way of telling on my end. Are they good? Am I still peaking the mic? Like, where are we at? I know you guys were talking about me peaking the mic earlier. We still doing that? I tried to fix some settings. Quiet audio for me? Okay, here, I'll turn it up. How's this? Louder on the video? Okay. Your audio's fine? Okay. I'll turn that down a little bit. And...
of the Michael Knowles Show, who also has a candle line, Michael?
You know, I only sell combustibles now. So I have my Mayflower cigars. I wasn't sure if I'd become a candle mogul, but I guess a lot of the audience is a kind of live, laugh, love, suburban, feminine type, because we are selling bazillions of candles at thecandleclub.com. They're a great product. I'm not...
Cool. I'm not surprised that's where your core demographic is.
Surprised.
Ryan, maybe it's time for you to get into candles.
Everyone needs a good candle.
Yeah, that's for sure. Well, Michael, one thing we wanted to start off with, just putting all of our cards on the table, I can't think of two people that probably disagree more than you and Ryan Grimm. So we're hoping for a lively conversation, but one place to start could be, if Donald Trump loses the November election, what do you think went wrong? Who would deserve the blame? It is basically a tied race right now, so that's not outside the realm of possibility. Kamala Harris, despite all of the flaws that you and I might...
Hey!
Let's see what happens when I do this.
Oh, God.
BWA.
BWA. Matt Netanyahu, thank you for injecting some BWA into our festivities. Let's go.
Might ascribe to her, and I think reasonably so, is still, you know, popular among some swath of the American people, significant swath among the American people. Looks like an even swath compared with Donald Trump. So if Trump actually loses in November, who's to blame?
I think the blame would have to lie in the way that the system has been changed. So, in 2020, the election rules were largely changed to extend election day to election season and to encourage widespread mail-in ballots, which makes ballot harvesting a little bit easier. I'm not even really getting into the shenanigans that sometimes crop up in the city machines. I'm just talking about the actual now legal and official modes of conducting the election that obviously radically changed the nature of the election in 2020. A lot of people said, how is it possible that Biden could get 10 million more votes in 2020 than Democrats had done in 2016? And one answer to that is, well, because all the rules changed. So, you got a new game and you've got new results as a consequence of that. I think that would be really the only way to explain it. I love Trump. Not a big Kamala fan. I'm a conservative Republican, but even trying to take some distance here, it seems to me that the issues basically all cut for Trump right now. The economy cuts for Trump, foreign policy cuts for Trump, immigration cuts for Trump, some of the social issues cut for Trump. Probably the one issue that the Democrats are getting.
Before you get into that, because I think that's an interesting point to make, I did want to flag one point you made there, that access to the ballot is the only explanation for why there were so many more people voting in 2020 than 2016. I would just point out, so I was down in DC on January 21st, 2017, covering the Women's March. I have never seen a march that big in my life in Washington, DC. Something like 5 million people, most of them women, came out and marched that day against Donald Trump. This is the day after he was...
I'm sorry, it took a moment to really sink in here, but Michael Knowles is basically just saying that, well, it wasn't really, it was a bit rigged in 2020, but now it's super rigged, and, he has no evidence whatsoever for that.
Inaugurated. Democrats themselves, the Democratic leadership, was hostile to or skeptical of that Women's March. They were flat on their back. This was an organic kind of Facebook generated reaction to the election of Donald Trump. And it was real. The anger and the shock that Trump had become president was a real thing. And you saw that energy for 4 straight years, and you saw it metastasize.
I have to be completely honest with you. Do conservatives not know how utterly asinine that idea is? Frankly, Joe Biden has been given an unprecedented amount of power and authority by the Supreme Court. If he wanted to rig the election, he could. He's legally immune from being prosecuted, really, for this. And so it's well, he's not doing it, because if he absolutely could right now if he wanted to, with zero repercussions. It's true, fascists do think everyone agrees with them. It is an insane flaw of their kind.
Some really interesting ways that we can talk about, and I think that played a significant role in why so many people voted in 2020. They were just livid at Trump.
I'm not so sure. I'm not denying the left is good at street organizing. They do it a lot, but I don't think the Women's March was unique. You saw similar street protests with the George Floyd riots. Even before that, you saw it with Occupy Wall Street. Even before that, you saw it with the anti-Bush war protests.
Occupy Wall Street. I covered that too. There were dozens of people at Occupy Wall Street, hundreds at the most. But there were Occupy protests throughout the country too. There was even in New Haven. I was in college at the time, and they had Occupy New Haven, which I agree was pretty pitiful. But even going back to the Bush era, you had Code Pink, you had all of these kind of protests. So the left does that. The left takes to the streets throughout the 1970s. It was
that
just
doesn't always translate to votes.
It was substantially different. The numbers of people, that 5 million people is the most in American history, came out against Trump. I'm just saying, it's just worth understanding that as.
Ryan Grimm has this really his energy is just so chill, that it's really, I think it takes people like Michael Knowles aback, because essentially he's just well, you're just wrong though. But he's not getting worked up about it. He's just well, you're just, the facts you have are bad. and that's not your fault. I mean, maybe you just missed it. It's totally reasonable that you may have missed that fact, but it's at the end of the day, like, it's just not accurate to the reality that we all live in and share. Like, he's just so, like, it's like an aggressive calmness that I find fascinating.
Like, know your enemy, know your adversary. Like, they were pissed, and it was real.
Yeah, maybe. The left gets very angry, and they do it in different numbers at different times. My only contention is I don't know that street protests always translate to success at the ballot box. If that were the case, I think probably Kerry would have won in 2004, and I think probably Hillary would have won in 2016. So what changed here was not that the Democrats were especially angry, or that a certain segment, women were especially angry. I think what changed, and what accounts for 10 million new votes, is that they changed the election rules. And so you describe that as access to the ballot. I suppose certain people who otherwise would not be motivated to vote, who weren't paying attention to the election, might have cast a ballot because of ballot harvesting. But it also does.
I don't want to get bogged down, and I'm just saying you can't compare the Women's March and the amount of energy that pulsed into the streets in 2017 to the Iraq War. I was actually participated in that. That was before I was a journalist. There were a couple 100,000 at the peak that came out for that. Code Pink is like 6 people in a group house in DC. Like, these are not
there was more to the Iraq War
remotely comparable movements. And you don't have to absorb any of this that I'm saying, but your analysis is going to continue to be confused if you really believe that Code Pink.
See, like the framing of this on Ryan's part is brilliant, right? Because he's like, well, you can continue to be confused if you like, because it really taps into this, this fundamental desire to be correct, Like, Michael Knowles wants to essentially be like, actually, I am correct, but like, there's no good way for him to actually get to that point, without contradicting himself.
War is the same as 5 million women coming out of the streets in 2017,
I think
and the
every
effect
4
that
years
had
or
on
so.
our politics.
I think the libs come out every 4 years or so, and they yell and they scream.
Okay,
and
but
burn
they
things
don't. That's
down,
just
and
historically inaccurate. But good. Continue with a historically inaccurate analysis, and you're going to have an improper kind of strategy out of it.
Well, Michael, maybe here's a good question.
I don't know. It kind of looks like we're winning the election right now. So I think I think the Republican strategies play pretty well. We'll see. We'll see if the Republicans can overcome the new rule changes that the Democrats crammed down everybody's throats. But as of right now, the polls are looking very, very good for Trump. So if anyone needs to rethink strategy, I think it would probably be the party that ran a guy who obviously had dementia, lied about it, swapped out the candidate at the last minute for a woman who never got a primary vote while she was running for president on issues that she can't win.
Michael's running away.
Other than maybe trying to promote infanticide, even then, probably not going to push her over the finish line.
Well, let's talk about that, because to your point, now, Donald Trump has never been, this is a weird figure, but he's actually never been more or less unpopular. If you look at his favorability ratings, they've gone up since like 2020, which is baffling. And if you had told me on January 7th that would happen, the only way I would believe it is if the media continued to react very poorly to like legitimately objectionable things that Donald Trump was doing, but having the exact opposite of what made sense of a reaction from the media, not understanding his voters, not understanding why people continue to like him. That was the only way that it would make sense to me. But the point that I wanted to ask is, as you mentioned, it looks like a lot of the issues that are front of mind for voters are cutting in Republicans' favor, cutting in Trump's favor. But even so, this is basically a statistically tied race, meaning there's a lot of support for Kamala Harris. And I guess maybe to Ryan's point, what do you make of that? Why are so many people, if all of those issues are cutting in Donald Trump's election, the media right now is asking, why isn't Kamala Harris running away with the election? But maybe the question is, why isn't Donald Trump running away with the election if the issues are so in his favor?
Well, I think that there are a lot of historical issues with it, but I think that the chief issue right now is the way that the election is being conducted. So we talk about new voters being brought in. Obviously, the Biden-Harris administration has flooded the country with foreign nationals. Many
They can't vote. That, like, all of these are red herrings. The foreign nationals can't vote in our election. That's just not how our system works. And they, like, will be found out if they try to vote.
many of whom are planning to vote in the election. You don't need to take my word
Citation needed.
for it. The Heritage Foundation got video interviewing illegal aliens who admitted on camera, I'm an illegal alien. I have been registered to vote, and I intend to vote for Kamala Harris. So
Oh, really? Let's, you know what? Heritage Foundation video, illegal immigrant vote. Let's see. Oh, weird. This was the #1 result. Heritage Foundation spreads deceptive videos about non-citizen voters. Wow, that's so crazy. The Georgia Secretary of State's office called one video a stunt. Huh. In July, 2 men went door-to-door at a sprawling apartment complex in Norcross, Georgia, an Atlanta suburb that is hub to the region's fastest-growing Latino population, asking residents if they were U.S. citizens and whether they were registered to vote. Speaking in Spanish, often peeking from behind half-closed doors, 7 people told the men they were not citizens but that they were registered to vote. Although the 2 men claimed to represent a company helping Latinos navigate the election system, they were actually working with the Heritage Foundation and carrying a hidden camera. Days later, the conservative think tank posted a video on social media containing some of the footage the men had captured, calling it staggering evidence that 14% of non-citizens in Georgia, which Heritage said extrapolated to more than 47,000 people, were registered to vote. Based on our findings, the video concluded, the integrity of the 2024 election is in great jeopardy. The video was then reposted by Elon Musk. Cool. But under scrutiny, those claims do not hold up. 3 of the 7 people Heritage filmed later said they had misspoken. State investigators found no evidence that any of the 7 people on the tape had ever registered to vote. A spokesman for Georgia's Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, a Republican, called the video a stunt. It was one of several misleading videos that the Heritage Foundation has pumped into social media feeds this year. While the once staid think tank has received attention recently for Project 2025, check out that playlist, the right-wing blueprint for a future Trump administration that the group funded, it has also made its mark with an aggressive effort to shape public opinion, seeding falsehoods about the integrity of the 2024 election across social media and conservative news outlets. So, basically, they lied because they're a propaganda network for conservative billionaires. It's really not that complicated. And it's not that surprising that Michael Knowles, an employee for a conservative propaganda outlet funded by billionaires, would cite that misinformation.
So this is all available online. You've seen some pushback against that in various states, but it's just a fact that when you have 8 million new border encounters over a 3.5-year period, foreign nationals who overwhelmingly identify with Democrats, that's going to have downstream demographic effects, especially because we know that the children, even the grandchildren of these immigrants, many of whom are illegal immigrants, identify as Democrats, and they will have the right to vote.
But she's at 49% in the RCP average.
Just one final point on this. This is after the largest movement of people in recorded history, which is immigration into the United States since 1965. So I think that's part of the reason is that the Democrats have explicitly campaigned on changing the demographics of the country in a cynical way that actually often harms the people they're bringing in, but will help them electorally. I think that's why this election looks different than if it were taking place, say, 20 years ago.
Walk us through how somebody who is here illegally would vote. Like what?
I love Ryan Grimm. Yeah, please. What's the process here? You're saying millions of undocumented immigrants are voting. Walk us through. How does that work? It's an excellent way to get Michael Knowles to do what he does, which is talk. But there's not really a defined method of illegal voting here. So anything that Michael Knowles responds with here, you can see how unhappy he is with this question. is going to sound like malarkey. Like any specifics Michael Knowles gives here are going to pigeonhole him into like a definite way of illegally voting that, like, if it were true, people could look into that and find a bunch of illegal votes, tens of thousands of illegal votes. But oddly enough, they can't, because he's just pulling that method out of his butt.
Well, he would.
And why have we failed to catch anybody other than like one or two people in the past?
No,
like,
we've caught more than one or two people, but
like,
part of,
maybe six.
Well, yeah, I think it's probably more than six. The way that we
Seven?
The way that
like, it's nothing. It's like minuscule, and then they're all in Texas.
Yeah, no, they're not. They're actually throughout a number of states, including some liberal states like California.
You notice how Michael Knowles, if the number was as large as he tries to imply it would be, would simply cite that large number, but instead he's like, well, it's more than six, but like that more than six is like, you know, honestly, like
that is a problem
seven.
that can be fixed. Malarkey BWA.
Matt, that's Yahoo. Thank you for gifting Amber Brains a sub and for supporting stream. I very much appreciate it.
But California would be a good place to start because of motor voter laws. So that's the easiest way. When illegal aliens in states with liberal policies go to the DMV, they're allowed to get driver's licenses and other identification forms. And at the DMV, they're allowed to register to vote. Now, of course, officially speaking, they're not supposed to register.
I'm sorry. Are you saying that the evil DMV is registering undocumented immigrants to vote? Do you understand how much paperwork has to be done at the DMV? Michael? They keep you waiting forever because they're doing the paperwork, Michael. Like, they can't process fake paperwork for millions of people at the DMV, Michael. Come on.
To vote. But
if that were true, there would be a paper trail that would be so incredibly large you could see it from space.
Everyone is automatically being offered the opportunity to register to vote when they're getting their driver's license. Then the people who don't have that.
I'm sorry. One second here. I'm just gonna look this up. Okay, just looking this up. Can an undocumented person register to vote at the DMV? Or, actually, none of that typed out. Damn it. Can an undocumented person register to vote when they get their driver's license? Here, you know what? Here's a good answer to this. This is from the Minnesota Reformer. Would automatic voter registration allow non-citizens to vote? Yep. Minnesota Democratic lawmakers this session are proposing to expand driver's license eligibility to people without legal permission to reside in the U.S. At the same time, they're proposing to automatically register everyone to vote. Could the people here illegally use the new license to vote? Yes, but it's a felony with steep consequences, and Democrats say their automatic voter registration has safeguards in place so that non-citizens won't be registered. Yep, with some Republican backing. Proposed driver's license eligibility expansion for years. Okay. Driver's licenses for all. It's a good program, by the way. Make sure everyone who's driving on the road has been trained to drive, which is great. Okay. Leading the charge in the House to broaden the eligibility for a Minnesota driver's license or ID card so people can get one without proof of citizenship. The license would look identical to every other Class D license. Hey, Archangel, thank you for being
2 months
subscribed.
shy of 4 years.
For almost 4 goddamn years. Thank you for being with me for the long haul, friendo. Let's see. Gomez said the legislation brings the state back to where it was prior to 2003, when the state was under GOP Governor Tim Pawlenty, started requiring proof of legal residence to obtain a license. Advocates, including in law enforcement, say issuing licenses to undocumented people would make roads safer because fewer drivers would be operating without licenses. True. All right. Some Republicans say the current effort could allow non-citizens to vote. Okay. Let's see. In order to register, a person needs to show a valid Minnesota ID or photo ID plus a document with their current name and address, such as a utility bill or residential license.
The AG also has to certify your eligibility after you register. Registration does not mean you can vote.
Simric, thank you for the $5 super chat. I very much appreciate it. Thank you so, so much. Now let's see here. A person could technically present a driver's license they obtained through Gomez's bill if it were to pass. That person would need to sign a statement attesting to their U.S. citizenship at the polling place if they were to vote, something the vast majority of people illegally residing in the U.S. aren't willing to risk. The penalties under federal immigration law that people would face are so severe, we just don't see people attempting to register or attempting to vote. Adding it's a deportable offense with a potential lifetime ban if a person illegally residing in the U.S. is caught voting. All right. Could a person who's obtained a driver's license under the new eligibility be automatically registered to vote? Let's see. If a person without legal permission to live in the state obtains a license, they are not automatically registered to vote. Crazy. If someone was found to have lied about their citizenship, they could face deportation, denial of future citizenship, and/or fines and imprisonment under federal law. So basically, guys, what the answer to this is that you could potentially illegally vote. However, the argument Michael Knowles is making here is that, well, all undocumented immigrants are banding together, or even a vast majority of them are banding together to vote for Democrats because the Democrats will then make them legal citizens, and that will then make it okay that they illegally voted. Which doesn't make any sense. Even if you're a legal citizen of the United States and you illegally vote or commit voter fraud, you get years in prison. You know, you get a pretty stiff penalty, even if you're a legal citizen of the United States. Benefit, 1 extra vote. Risk, your entire life being thrown into a blender. Yeah, the trade-off is not worth it. And it implies that undocumented immigrants have way more trust in Democrats than most people in the United States do. Thank you for the good reporting, Minnesota Reformer.
That eligibility, but nonetheless can get a driver's license, sometimes fall into that pile. You're seeing a big issue right now in Arizona because there's a difference between the federal law and the state and the local law. So for state and local elections, people have to show proof of citizenship to register to vote. For the federal level, they don't, which to me is pretty crazy. It seems to me that if anything, it ought to be flipped, and the federal elections are the more important ones. But in any case, that's the rule right now. So now Arizona has to deal with hundreds of thousands of people who are potentially ineligible to vote, and they're probably going to be able to vote anyway, and it will be fought after the election, which is why right now the establishment, just one final point on this. This is why the establishment media right now
Brian's just like, yeah, right.
The notion that we won't have the results on election night, which is preposterous. PBS had a headline. They said, not only will we not have the results on election night, but it's normal not to have the results on election night. Every election in my lifetime, including Bush v. Gore, when Democrats tried to overturn the results of that election before it became unpatriotic to try to overturn the results of an election, even in 2000, we had the results on election night. So I'm not sure when it became normal. I guess it's just when the Dems waved their magic wand 4 years ago.
Well, they didn't have the results until December when the Supreme Court
because
decided,
Al Gore
right?
challenged the election, but they actually did call the election that night.
So,
But they had needed a recount.
but Kamala Harris is at
Well, they
49.
didn't need it. Al Gore pushed for it and then tried to overturn
Right,
the
and there
election.
are laws that
failed.
allow for a recount.
That was back though when Democrats enjoyed overturning the election.
But okay, so
Excuse me.
What are you talking about, Michael? Yeah, the country was in chaos like election night 2000. Like it was like the case of the century, and the only reason Al Gore, I believe, the only reason Al Gore did not win the presidency was because he made the calculation that it was a lot of chaos to put the country through when he was not at all sure if he had won or not. And so he stepped back, and I, to this day, really, 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 really wish he hadn't. Probably would have stopped us from getting into a lot of wars in the Middle East.
In the RCP average, Kamala Harris is at like 49%. So
Also, I do just want to point out here that this is, I always need to point this out. Donald Trump, when he was president, put Chris Kobach in charge of a committee, or not a committee, a commission, to look into voter fraud. And his mandate was basically to find as much voter fraud as possible, right? So Chris Kobach, he's pretty infamous in Kansas, I believe. He has made it his life's goal to throw doubt on the integrity of our elections. And this was like an immense amount of power granted to him specifically to fulfill his life's purpose. And you want to know what happened over the course of around 2 years? Or 3 years, I think? 2 or 3 years running that commission? They found next to nothing. They found next to zero voter fraud. It was like 1 or 2 cases, and I think that the state had to like sue Chris Kobach for like his like for like ethical infractions. It was weird. It was weird. They didn't find anything, and at the end of the day, Donald Trump very quietly ended that commission. Okay? Without releasing any of the results publicly. Those results, I believe, did wind up leaking, but that being said, if Donald Trump like gave carte blanche to the #1 guy who says election fraud is rampant, that there are tens of millions of fraudulent votes in the election, and that guy couldn't prove it, he could only find like 2 or 3 cases. Why are we still going with this narrative? And the answer to that is, frankly, low information voters, predominantly low information Republican voters, do not know that voter fraud is vanishingly rare. Vanishingly rare. They don't know. They just don't know. They've never encountered the idea that voter fraud happens like 0.00001% of the time in our elections. It's like 1 vote for every like I think it's like 1 vote for every 100 million that gets cast is fraudulent. It's really, really weird. It's really, really vanishingly small chance. God damn. Also, yeah, Harold, like, Michael Knowles looks significantly older than I am, and I think we're the same age.
basically, the thing I would disagree with that you're saying is that the amount of, I mean, there's obviously been a huge flood of both legal and illegal migration into the country over the course of the Biden administration. But if I were
no, exactly, Brutus Magnuson. It's designed to sound like it makes intuitive sense because, you just ask someone, do you want elections to be like secured? And they're like, yeah. And they're like, well, there are some insecure things. And then you bring up how an undocumented immigrant might be able to vote with a driver's license. And suddenly they're like, oh, it's not secure. Never thinking of the fact that, like, if they ever got caught doing that, they would be instantly deported. They would be separated from their family. They'd lose like their entire livelihoods and they'd never be able to return. Like, it's a pretty steep price to pay for 1 vote in an election where millions are cast.
To ascribe a percentage point of like the RCP average that is boosting Kamala Harris to 49.4%. I think they have Trump around 48%. I just don't know how significant that would be, to be honest. I mean, it seems like the American people are genuinely torn between Trump and Harris. Do you disagree with that?
I think the American people are torn between the right and the left. That's certainly true. And I think that the left controls basically all of the institutions at this point. And so America has liberalized significantly. I mean,
man, I don't know why I put these on. I'm not going to wear them. But you got to really admire the gall that Michael Knowles has, where he takes an air of smug superiority, but then he's like, yeah, actually, our enemies control all the major institutions, and we're really bad at winning. And it's like, you're a movement of losers. You're a coalition of degenerates. Like you're like a group of self-hating, like, sycophants for power. Like, yeah, of course you're losers.
Whatever you think about the so-called social issues, it's simply a fact that when Hillary Clinton was running in 2008, she ran on abortion being safe, legal, and rare. She ran on abortion being a bad thing. Now the Democrats shout their abortion.
Wait, but Michael, she ran on it being safe and what was that second one again? Legal, Michael. You can't be like, oh, and now Democrats have always wanted it safe, legal, and rare, man. You're the one who's now trying to, like, twist the past to suit your present needs. Because, again, fascists are anti-empiricists. They do not believe in data. They do not believe in history that they have not written for themselves. They are, death cult freaks.
When Barack Obama was president during his first term, he believed that marriage was a sacred union between a man and a woman. That was as recent as 2011. And then Joe Biden blabbed that they were going to change position, and they finally did. But it was pretty recent. You're talking about 13 years ago. So the country has moved significantly to the left, and that gives an advantage to Kamala. She just happens to be so weak a candidate, and Trump happens to be more sympathetic than he's ever been, because after years of the Democrats justifying his assassination, someone actually pulled out the gun and tried to do it, and nearly succeeded the first time, and tried again a second time. So he, as you say, he's the least unpopular that he's ever been right now. And also all of the issues are cutting in the Republicans' favor. So I agree with you. This is bad news for Republicans, that even with all of the headwinds working for Republicans, it's still a close election. But that's what happens when the Democrats have succeeded at reshaping the country and the laws that shape cultural attitudes.
And Democrats would say that the reason that they're competitive, or the reason that why they might even have a slight advantage at this point, is Trump's success in overturning Roe v. Wade, and that the country has kind of recoiled at that. What's your assessment of that? And tell me, like, for people who our ecosystems don't overlap enough, so a lot of our viewers might not know. What exactly your politics are, where you are on this side. My understanding is you're like pretty hardcore on the life side.
I prepped him, Michael.
Like down the line. She prepped me a little bit. Like you're like down the line.
And this is the thing I like about Ryan Grimm, right? Like he approaches this conversation not as if, approaching an enemy, right? Instead, he approaches it in the sense that, like, he's like, this is a person I'm going to talk to. I'm going to talk to them like a human being. And I'm not going to make any preconceived notions. I'm just going to talk about what they bring to the table in this conversation. And I think that's a really valuable skill to have when talking with these far-right types, because ultimately, they're off their rockers. They're crazy. It's not even just human decency, Kupashal. It is, instead of bringing in outside points, you can really just rely on them bringing something to the table and it being almost entirely inaccurate or fabricated in some way. You don't have to get mad at something Michael Knowles said like last week or 2 days ago. You can just be like, the thing you're saying now is ludicrous. Like, how do you back that up? And then you just watch them, like, struggle to back up anything that they say,
And like as out there as you can get on it, right?
Yeah, I think we ought to protect babies. I think it's bad to kill babies. It's basically I guess that's an extreme position now. I used to be kind of a moderate and common sense
I'm for
position.
protecting babies too. You want to elaborate on that?
We agree.
Yeah.
I don't think we really need to elaborate. I think it's bad to kill babies. So that would inform my election choices. I agree with you that Roe v. Wade's overruling is an issue in the campaign. I think it's really the only issue that helps Democrats at all, and then only in certain places. But conservatives have debated how to react to this. You've seen a lot of Republicans just basically trying to downplay the issue on the campaign trail, which is probably fine as a matter of prudence. I think what happened with Roe v. Wade being overruled is not that pro-lifers merely won a victory. It's not that Democrats won a political victory, as some of them claim. It's that the whole conversation changed. So now the Supreme Court says in the Dobbs ruling that the issue has to go back to the states. The Supreme Court could have said that the 14th Amendment provides equal protection, and so you can't kill babies anywhere. That's certainly an argument. Professor Robbie George, John Finnis made that argument in an amicus brief to the court, but that's not what they said. They said the issue goes back to the states and people can vote on it. And so the issue for pro-lifers is that when abortion has come up as a ballot initiative, the pro-abortion policies have succeeded. They've prevailed pretty much every time. So Republicans are in a bad position right now because we're in a whole new ballgame. And so what is required is to win.
Yeah, it really is kind of a give themselves enough rope and they'll, play with it.
Hearts and minds and persuade
Scenario.
people that it's wrong to kill babies and it's good to protect life at the state level. But that's, not really a federal matter right now. The Supreme Court has ruled on it. So when Trump and J.D. Vance downplay the issue of abortion, I think they're doing so as a matter of political prudence, but it's also just common sense. They really have nothing to do with that issue right now. Unless the Supreme Court is going to reverse its position, which it's not, then that's really a matter for the states, and it's a matter for gubernatorial candidates and state legislature candidates to fight.
And not to debate the point, but just on the definition of babies again, do you think that an IUD kills babies?
Well, an IUD is a contraceptive device, right? So in principle, I'm not, not the biggest expert in contraception. I have 3 kids under 4, but from what I understand, that would prevent the conception of a baby. So preventing conception.
It in general prevents the implantation.
See, this is great. This is great. This is what I'm talking about, guys. Michael Knowles is a guy who, has dedicated his life to being pro-life. He's dedicated his life to this issue, and he doesn't even understand how one of the most common forms of birth control works. Yeah, no, this is a total dog walk, Solar Lander. You've got it completely right. Ryan Grimm just it's like, you want to come on the show? You want to come on the show? Let's go for have a little show walkies, huh? Let's have a little show walkies, and then brings them along, lets them sniff the roses and stuff, and just slowly brings them to the park. It really is that level of embarrassing for Michael Knowles. How do you get this far in life and you don't know that? When you are specifically, and I'm not faulting a normal person for not knowing that, but his job centers around conservative activism, specifically on issues like being pro-life. So how does he not know the answer to this? Honestly, Gamergy, it must be ridiculously easy to do his job. It must be ridiculously easy. You don't have to know anything. You can just go in there and be a dumbass and just say whatever's on the teleprompter.
Oh, well, inasmuch, I suppose this would be similar to certain abortifacient drugs where the
Plan B.
the nature of it, like Plan B, is debated. And some people, you're being, I suppose, a little bit more blunt about it than many pro-sexual revolution types on the left. But many people argue that things like Plan B or things like IUDs are merely contraceptive and not abortifacient. But if they are contraceptive, then they prevent contraception. If they're abortifacient, they obviously involve abortions.
Yeah, it's just a matter of basic fact that sometimes they prevent implantation.
Right.
So you would
I
consider
suppose
that a baby. So you would say IUDs, if that's the case, if I'm right about that you think that IUDs, a woman with an IUD is like killing babies.
I guess the question you're asking me is, when do I think human life begins? Mm-hmm. And so my answer is, I think it begins at the beginning. I don't know when else you would say it begins. Now, of course, no one's really campaigning in this this election.
Where's
they're
the
not even really
beginning?
campaigning on abortion, but no one's really campaigning against IUDs or any contraception or anything like that. We're pointing out that the Democrats have taken their
why
safe,
not?
legal, rare position.
See, you see how effortless Ryan makes this look. Like, you see, this is incredible stuff.
Well, they're pointing out against IUDs or any contraception.
Where's
They're
the
not even really
beginning?
campaigning on abortion, but no one's really campaigning against IUDs or any contraception or anything like that. We're pointing out that the Democrats have taken their
why
safe,
not?
legal, rare position. Well, the reason is because the
You
Democrats
just said
have
you're
moved the
voting on
goalpost.
kill.
I'm
You don't
happy
want
to
to
give
kill
you an answer if
babies.
you like, Ryan.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
So the reason that they're not campaigning on that is because the Democrats have moved the goalposts so far. They used to campaign on safe, legal, and rare. Now they campaign on abortion at any moment up till birth. And
Oh, this liar, dude. Yeah, Democrats have moved the goalposts. Ignore what Republicans did by getting rid of Roe v. Wade. Ignore the loss of Roe v. Wade. Democrats are the ones moving the goalposts here. God. Doesn't Project 2025 have stuff in it that's anti-birth control, including IUDs? I don't know the specifics of the Project 2025 birth control stuff that they're advocating, but I do know that the Republican Party is anti-birth control in all forms, including IUD, including the pill, including Plan B, including like literally all of it. Because at the end of the day, people like Michael Knowles believe that if you have sex, you should get STDs. If you have sex outside of marriage, you should get STDs. You should get pregnant, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that if you are having sex outside of marriage, God has ordained that you get those illnesses, you get that pregnancy, et cetera. It is about punishing people who are acting in ungodly ways. And so, like, at the end of the day, like, Michael Knowles here is being kind of disingenuous a little bit, because it's not Democrats that have changed their position on this. It's Republicans. Republicans are the ones who got rid of Roe v. Wade, and it's Republicans who are trying to enforce national abortion bans. They're trying to enforce state-level abortion bans. They're trying to make it a crime for women to cross borders in order to get abortions. Like, nah. Like, the idea that it's Democrats that have been moving the goalposts here is ridiculous.
and including afterbirth. So I know the Democrats are trying to run away with this because it's unpopular, but Andrew Cuomo, when he was governor of New York, was one of the first Democrat governors to change the law to say there will be no restrictions on abortion, even change the penal code such that if you killed a woman who was pregnant, it would no longer be double homicide. It would only be a single homicide. And then he lit up the Freedom Tower pink to celebrate. Tim Walz, as governor of Minnesota, repealed legal protections for babies who are born alive, who survive abortions. Babies can...
Yeah, because it's already a crime to kill them, Michael. Like, this is the thing I don't get, right? Like, does he know it's already a crime to kill a baby outside of the womb? Hey, Michael Knowles, do you know that it's a crime to murder? But murdering someone requires them to have already been born. So, like, you know where I'm going with this? It feels really painfully obvious for me to point this out, but, like, if a baby's been born, then doctors can't kill it, because that would be murder. Even if you call something an abortion and it's actually a murder, that's not like a get out of jail free card. You can't go to your bank, shoot somebody, and then be like, well, I was doing a late-term abortion, Your Honor, and then get off scot-free, which is essentially the world that Michael Knowles is proposing exists right now.
Can survive outside of the womb now. It's really is 24 weeks, 23 weeks, 22 weeks, even 21 weeks. So it's very, very young. Abortions take place up until the moment of birth. And so previously in Minnesota, there was a law that required doctors to provide medical care to babies who survive abortions, just as you would provide medical care to anybody who needed it. Tim Walz removed those protections. Tim Walz then also removed the reporting requirements. Now, we know the number is disputed, but we know somewhere at least 5, maybe 8, maybe more babies actually were born alive, and they were callously left to die without any medical care. So that's
Citation needed.
where we're fighting the issue right now, because it clarifies the issue so
Because
much. And it's where Democrats have brought the
because generally in stories like that, where Republicans point to stories of like a baby was born alive from an abortion and then they left it there to die. Generally, guys, those scenarios are with babies that have congenital defects that doctors cannot do anything for. Because doctors can't fix everything wrong with an adult human, a child-aged human, or a baby-aged human. They can't fix everything. And sometimes babies get born from an abortion or even non-abortions, and there's nothing that the doctors can do to keep them alive. It's really sad. But that is part of being alive. Not every baby that gets born has internal organs to keep themselves alive. And in a lot of those cases, doctors aren't allowed to they aren't allowed to do they aren't allowed to do those post-birth abortions. And so what ends up happening is that they have to leave a child with their parents to expire. And that's essentially all you can do sometimes. Sometimes you can't save somebody's life even if they're at the hospital. And I feel like conservatives should know this. That sometimes you get hurt or injured, or you're born injured in a way that can't be fixed. And so it really makes me sick for Michael Knowles to take stories like this and to try and twist them to make a pro-life argument of well, you see, doctors are killing babies, when that's not the case. It's just not the case.
The issue. It's not Republicans who have done that.
Well, Ryan, I saw your reaction to the after birth thing. Did you want to follow up on? I mean, Michael explained what happened in Minnesota, for example, which is it's a matter of not providing care, legalizing the declining to provide care. Is that not? I mean, that is a real thing that both Cuomo, it was something that Ralph Northam advocated for.
I guess, why don't we leave this to doctors? Who am I to,
Because we're
I
citizens
didn't go
of a
to medical
self-governing
school.
republic, and we
What's
have laws
that?
against murder. It's so amazing that the Democrats, who have been campaigning for socialized medicine for decades now, say on this one healthcare issue, we just need to get the government out of it. What are you talking about? We're citizens. We live in a self-governing republic. We have something to say about the laws. That's why we're all talking about an election here, and we're talking about a matter of life and death. Even if you take the babies out of it, for some reason you don't like the babies. Yeah. But let's say you're just talking about, I don't know, a disabled woman or something, just an adult who's in the room who requires desperate medical care in an emergency room. Would you say that doctors should just ignore her? Wouldn't you say that the law ought to impel medical providers?
The law already does impel medical providers to provide medical aid. What are you talking about, Michael? Those laws also impel medical providers to aid children who are born only to die. That's the thing, right? When we're talking about babies that get born and don't have the capacity to live, we're talking about babies that are born without brains. We're talking babies that are born with gigantic holes in their heart that are inoperable. We're talking about babies that whose lungs don't work. We're talking about babies that cannot stay alive on their own. And frankly, cannot even stay alive with medical assistance. Those are the babies that Michael Knowles is currently trying to use. That's the pain he's trying to mine here in order to make a pro-life argument, and I find it, frankly, very disgusting. Yeah, babies without kidneys. So, like, when Michael Knowles is making these points, he's just, frankly, cynically using the children of grieving parents to try and justify his position. It's really disgusting. This is why I call him demonic. I'm planning my day. How many dogs do you have in you? Salmon Moose? I don't know. Why do you ask?
To provide that urgent medical care. We have plenty of those laws on the books right now. Why is it just the case that when it comes to the most vulnerable, little babies, that for them, we, in the words of Ralph Northam, we just kind of put them on a table, you know, maybe make them a little comfortable and have a conversation between the
Yeah, Quigley in chat, I was born with a hole in my heart. If I'd been born 5 or 10 years earlier, I might not have lived past a year. Yeah, I mean, like, there are kids that get born with conditions that are not conducive to being alive, and it's really sad. If I'm going to be alive, I'm going to be alive until we finish this. We're not even halfway through yet.
doctor and the mother to see if
I might do stuff afterwards. We'll see.
Yeah, I don't want babies to die either, but I think it becomes very difficult to talk about when there's an entire movement that thinks that having an IUD is killing a baby. So at that point,
so you
you're
keep
like,
trying to change the subject from the real political issue to a contrived political issue, because you know that the real political issue, as it's being fought, the Democrat position is completely indefensible and abhorrent to anyone who has even a modicum of a conscience. So you try to move to a contrived political issue.
So why not argue around there? Like,
right
why
now.
why not argue around the final trimester and supporting if a fetus is viable, like then.
Well, hold on. There's a big difference between the final trimester and an IUD or something, right? There's a lot of space in the middle, and right now the issue.
Yeah, but you don't want any of that space, Michael. You've already talked about that.
Is that abortion is effectively legal at any point, including in some places after birth, which is just.
God. All right. I will be right back, folks. Don't go anywhere. I need to take a quick break. We're jumping back in. We're going to finish this this Michael Knowles debate situation. Here we go. Also, we've been going for a few hours now. If you've been enjoying the show, please hit the follow button, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and consider dropping those subs and donos, because those are what allow me to continue streaming despite being the way I am. All right, here we go. And we're back. Here we go.
Called murder. So I think what the Democrats are trying to do is really blur this issue, and I'm all for having bioethical debates over the origin of life and all the right. I find that all very interesting. But we're in an election season, and what I'm observing is the actual political issue, the actual political the policies that are being advanced by the Democrats right now, all concern those latter stages, the much clearer point of this, up until the moment of birth, shout your abortion, changing the penal code, for goodness sakes, in New York. Why is it that the Democrats, why is it that you, Ryan, when we're debating this right now, you are desperately trying to avoid that part of it? Because you know that that's a losing issue for people.
Well, I'll tell you the reason. My view on this is I don't even want to have a view on this. Like, exactly. I don't want to have anything to do with it. Like, I want this
slavery doesn't
to be left
concern me.
Between women.
That's an issue for the southern
doctor.
states. Forget about that. It's
not the southern states. It's for women and their doctors. Just work this. Like, I trust them to make the decision that is best for them. And there's so much to think about in this world that Like
There's
why
so
do I
much
need
to think about.
I'm
So
curious.
why do I
I'm
have
curious
to, why do I have
I'm
to
curious.
talk about infanticide or the law
So why,
or elections or politics? I don't know, bro,
where
because
on
you're
your
a
list is
citizen
this?
in a self-governing republic, and this is a deeply
yeah, okay.
important moral issue.
There's a lot of deeply important moral issues. Why do you care so much about this? I'm just curious. I don't even necessarily want to debate the question because
Sure,
I'm not sure
I'll
there's
tell you
even
why.
that much point. But what?
I'm happy to
what-
tell you why.
yeah.
Because the right to life is not just one right among many. It's not like the privilege to drive a car or the right to smoke a cigarette at the age of 21. The right to life is the fundamental right on which all of the other rights rely. It cuts down to the very core of our being. So this is why we have very serious laws against murder. It's why we take murder laws and murder trials more seriously than laws about jaywalking or tickets about parking. So this is obviously a really important issue, cuts to the heart of who we are, how we think about all of morality and all of the law and all of the human person. And the people who we're talking about here are the most vulnerable people among us who don't have a voice, who are innocent little babies. So to me, that seems kind of important. You know, I know there are a lot of big issues in the world, but I think I would.
Okay, but he doesn't care about like adult people. He doesn't care about fully grown people. Like all of the policies that he's ever pushed for in his entire life are for harming people who have already been born. That Michael Knowles' main platform is how he can more effectively negatively impact other people in this world.
I would put jaywalking or even tax rates at a less significant part of this debate than, say, the right to life.
Yeah, I mean, when again pursuing that question, like when in your life did women's pregnancies become like something that you were like, this is the thing I really am going to make my.
Well, it's not women's pregnancies became important to me when my wife was pregnant for the first time because I had to, go get her like snacks and things at night. But life, the question of human life, morality has been a question for a long time. I mean, if you're interested in politics and you're not interested in practical morality, well, I don't really know what you're doing because the law, by definition, is a codification of practical moral views. And I, by the way,
But I mean, I guess for you, is this like an always thing? Like, is this an always thing? Like the first time in like middle school you learned about it, you're like, I need to fight for these.
I mean, he's Catholic, right, Michael?
No. I'm Catholic, but I was an apostate for a long time. So I was, from the age of 13 to 23, I was pretty irreligious. And so I was in favor of legal abortion. I had no problem with it. I didn't understand why pro-lifers believed in it. And I was having a lunch one day during a summer fellowship with a bioethicist. And she was asking me my views on things. And I said, I'm a Republican. I like low taxes, but I don't care about abortion. I think it's fine. And then we had a long conversation about it. And she persuaded me that I was wrong. So I know in our modern day, it's unusual for people to be persuaded by arguments, but she persuaded me that there's really no argument for abortion, and that the argument in favor of life and defending the preborn is pretty much rock solid.
You were 23?
No, I was 21 during that lunch. I was 23 when I reverted to the church.
And so you're 21 and you got argued into being anti-abortion
by a very intelligent bioethicist. Yeah.
Well,
okay.
So on that point,
interesting.
Now,
yes, you see, he must have been argued into it by a very intelligent person. The smartest boy, the smartest girl, was the only one capable of swaying him. The most brilliantest boy in the college.
Ryan asked a question earlier that to all of this, at the heart of all of this, he said, well, when is the beginning? When does the beginning begin? And an issue where that question is incredibly salient is on IVF, which has become something of an election issue because Donald Trump is now campaigning on being, what did he say, the father of IVF, something to that extent. And Michael, you're a staunch opponent of IVF for a lot of the reasons that we've already talked about. So how do you sort of square that circle? How do you justify support for Donald Trump, somebody who's even walked back prior pro-life statements and seemed to, at least for the sake of political expediency, I don't actually know what's in his heart or what he really believes, kind of moderate on that particular issue and then extend it to him calling himself the father of IVF, campaigning on free IVF, like universal IVF access by the federal government or through some combination of federal grants and state grants. How do you sort of rationalize supporting Trump if, as you say, human life is really the fundamental question of our politics.
Sure. Well, there are two parts to that. One, on President Trump speaking more ambiguously about pro-life. I actually think that's probably a good idea. I would encourage him to be a little more ambiguous, just as a matter of political prudence. I wouldn't encourage him to lie. It would be immoral to lie. But in terms of downplaying an issue, the one issue that the Democrats seem to be winning on, I think that's probably a good idea because, to quote Cocaine Mitch McConnell, the winners go to Washington to make laws and the losers go home. So I really don't have a problem with prudence in politics. When it comes to in vitro fertilization, there's another.
Yeah, that's the thing. He does lie, right? Like, he's been demonstrably shown to be a liar in the span of this conversation.
Reminder that politics is the art of the possible. It's the art of the second best and the art of inclusion. A lot of arts in politics. And in vitro fertilization is a relatively novel technology that poses complex bioethical questions that most people have never considered because it's not their job to consider it. And it's.
I guarantee you the people who considered getting IVF have considered it, Michael. I guarantee you that a lot of people have actually considered these questions. People get IVF all the time, Michael.
Just, they go about their lives, and it's kind of a new idea. This is true even among pro-lifers. So when we're talking about a relatively small subset of the population that views IVF to be morally unacceptable, you're talking about a small number of people. Add on.
Yeah, currently, by the way, the IVF, let's see, the global fertility market is around $34.7 billion in value at the moment.
To that many people know someone or know someone who knows someone who is conceived via IVF. And though that would not be morally dispositive, just as you'd say, I know people who have been conceived in the case of rape. Their lives are, of course, as valuable as anyone else's life. They have a right to life, but that's not to justify rape, of course, like that. Good ends don't.
I mean, it feels kind of like that's what you're doing, though. Like it kind of feels like you're saying that it was good to force that rape victim to give birth. Like you're trying to make the argument here, Michael, that like the rape was bad, but forcing the mother to give birth was good. Because but good ends don't justify bad means, but you're justifying the bad mean by justifying someone who is being forced to give birth. Like that's your fundamental proposition here on this issue.
Don't justify immoral means, but it's difficult to overcome that emotional hurdle, that hurdle of pathos. So I think probably the prudent thing to do here. The Catholics have always been opposed to IVF because the Catholics take bioethics very seriously. But it's not just the Catholics. The Southern Baptist Convention just came out. This is the largest Protestant denomination in the country. Just came out and said IVF is probably morally unacceptable. Most people just don't know why. They don't realize that IVF creates lots and lots of embryos that will be destroyed or frozen indefinitely. They don't consider that IVF commodity.
Okay, so his position is that IVF is evil. Okay, gotcha. And he's trying to be real cagey about it. It's weird. I mean, most people don't know why it's evil, but it's very evil. The most evil thing you can do.
Is human life. It turns human life, humans from proper subjects with rights into objects, commodities to be bought and sold, traded at the baby store. It raises all sorts of questions over who has rights in reproduction.
Michael, we're talking about cells, man. They aren't made into a babe. They need to be implanted first. Like, you understand that, right?
Traditionally understood, the only people.
The Southern Baptists only exist because there were Baptists who wanted to keep slavery, so pardon me for not giving a damn what the Southern Baptists think. Well, that's the thing, Gamergy. Michael Knowles also doesn't give a damn about what the Southern Baptists think. He's a Catholic. He thinks that they are fundamentally wrong and backwards, so, like, dropping this citation seems really weird.
people who have rights in reproduction are babies to be the right.
Turning humans into commodities sounds an awful lot like capitalism. You mean selling labor?
To be the product of the specific conjugal act of their parents joined together in marriage.
I don't understand what they get out of pretending that IVF is evil. Well, Sassy Sasserai, the main thing that they get is that their ideology kind of pigeonholes them into needing to make this argument. Because the point that they have run with, by the way, that is not biblical in nature, is that life begins at conception. That life begins when that sperm enters that ovum, you know? And that is when a baby is considered to them to be a baby. And so, because they've taken that party line for decades now, it kind of puts them in an uncomfortable spot where they have to like go out there and be like, yeah, it is, yeah, it's an evil sin. They're just in like this weird position where they can't escape from a very inconvenient position. I know I said the word position a lot there. I'm sorry.
Marriage. Now we have this notion that people have a right to a baby, just like, I don't know, a wealthy woman has the right to a handbag or something. That's obviously not acceptable. But people haven't really considered all of this. You know, I mean, this is kind of new stuff. And so I give people a lot of grace on it, you know, and I just think we need to work this out. I really agree with the Baptists in their statement. People need to work this out, consider this issue. I hope they do it before some of the negative consequences emerge, because IVF, no matter what fine effects come as a result, IVF establishes the domination of science and technology over the origin and destiny of human life. All that said, 13 days to a presidential election, you are not going to radically persuade hundreds of millions of people of a complex and nuanced bioethical point with regard to a novel technology that most people consider to be an unmitigated good. It's just not going to happen. So if some political candidates want to, kind of dance around the issue or not address it.
Although Trump's leaning all into it. Trump's leaning fully into it.
Just as an FYI, the first IVF birth took place in 1978. This is not that novel of a technology.
He said, I'm the father of IVF.
Other Republican senators have done that too. And you know, the thing is, I don't think he's being cynical about that. I don't think he's being opportunistic. I fully grant, as somebody who takes this matter very seriously, and I think about bioethics a lot, it's complex. It requires, some nuance.
It's only slightly more novel than like the invention of penicillin. Come on.
Understanding and an examination of first principles. And so I bet Trump is right. And I bet, if he could have a conversation with a bioethicist like I had, I don't know, maybe he might be persuaded like I was.
If he's against people treating embryos as objects, that means he's also against parents treating their children as extensions of themselves and having to dress and follow the parents' rules and ideas.
Unfortunately, his holy book doesn't really follow that train of logic, so you lost him on that one. Thank you for the $5 dono, though.
Trump being persuaded of something is
Trump
funny.
talking to a bioethicist is funny.
Yeah, that's awesome. all of that's pretty amusing to think of. Let me run something past you, get your reaction to it. You know, from the feminist perspective and also broadly from a left-wing perspective, there's always a lot of skepticism of people who say that they are opposed to abortion because they're out to protect babies. That the idea is like, okay, maybe some of the people who are marching in the streets believe that, but the leaders of the movement, they actually have a much bigger agenda at play here. And that agenda is pushing back against women's rights, against the entire sexual revolution, which they think was a mistake in the 60s and the 70s. That maybe modernity itself was a giant mistake. All these women in the workplace, so you want to go.
By the way, every single generation has had people that are like, modernity was a mistake. You know, you had it when like the Industrial Revolution happened. You had it when like people moved to cities for the first time. You had like, you can go back and look at the writings of people in those time periods, and they all think of that like the new way is wrong and weird and bad. The old ways were good. By his logic, oral is cannibalism. Brutus Magnuson, yeah. By his logic, yeah. I mean, he would argue around that and say, like, oh, well, you know, it has to be in the egg before it counts. But, like, honestly, I feel like if you take his position to its logical, like, extension, like, yeah, the component parts of what goes into that would also be considered, what goes into conception would also be considered sacred and wasteful to use outside of a marriage. You know, like, if you're masturbating, that's a crime. If you are, you know, ovulating and not conceiving, that's a crime. Like, honestly, like, it's really not that much farther away from where Michael Knowles is currently to believe those things.
Back to a different time. Make America great again. Maybe even back to before America. Emily was telling me you had a funny quote of, like, you don't want to go back to the 1950s.
1220.
1220. Okay. Right. So people hear that and they're like, oh, okay, I get it. This guy's just against all of modernity, basically, and women's liberation that came along with it. So is it a coincidence that those things align, and that they just happen to be separate, or do you see your mission against abortion rights as part and parcel of a kind of cultural counter-revolution?
I think you're thinking about it too deeply. I just think it's wrong to kill babies. Now, when you're talking about cynical or opportunistic motivations among leadership, I don't know. I see more cynicism on the side of the men who say that they're totally in favor of abortion. I think that allows men to use women for their sexual pleasure and then to not have any accountability. And, you know, I think...
Yeah, no, see, this is it, right? Like, men can use women for their sexual pleasure, and then, well, they aren't receiving the proper punishments. Yeah, exactly. Like, he wants you to be punished for being sinful. Like, he wants immediate punishment for your sins, even if whether you believe in his religion or not. Also, No Justice, thank you very much for the raid. KF Logan, thank you for the raid as well. Folks, go check out KF Logan 1875 as well as No Justice MTG. Go check them out on YouTube and on Twitch. Excellent content creators, fellow friends of the show. And please, raiders, come in, make yourselves comfy. We're finishing up this Ryan Grimm kind of blowing the back off of Michael Knowles.
I think it's just men saying, hey, honey, don't worry, I'll pay for the abortion. Please allow me to use you without any accountability. So I find a lot.
You know the women have like a say in that, Michael. Like, even if a guy buys them an abortion, like they can just say, "No, I'm gonna be pregnant anyway. Sorry." Like, it's their body, man. You don't seem to get this.
A lot more cynicism there. In terms of women's liberation, I don't know. It doesn't seem to have worked out very well. There was a study that came out of Yale, I think in 2008, somewhere around there, that measured female happiness. The study is the paradox of declining female happiness.
My theory is that Michael Knowles has never experienced sexual attraction in his entire life, and he's, like, you know, being weird about it.
And it observed that since women's liberation, so-called, in the early 1970s, women's happiness, self-reported happiness, has declined, both in objective measures and relative to men. So they've become significantly less happy than men have over that time. Now you have huge swaths of American women.
Although men have also become, significantly unhappy over decades. So I think we should go back to the kitchen.
Another
what do you
argument
think?
that would be, I think
that's where we would find happiness, right? We could.
Ryan is so, like, demure and, like, chill that whenever he throws, like, a little jab out there, it seems to land a little bit. Like, it takes Michael Knowles aback. Like, look, he looks shocked right now.
We can cook and clean.
Take care of the kids. Well, no, I think probably your point here is making my point, which is that men also are becoming less happy. Maybe there's something going a little bit wrong in the modern world. to bring us back to our first point, we used to conduct elections neatly and easily. We don't do that. Maybe something's going wrong in the modern world. So
by the way, I'm also
reason this study,
just FYI, I'm just skeptical of a lot of those surveys. I wrote a book. It's actually, is it back here? Yeah, there it is. On social history of drug use. There was a thing in the 40s and 50s called Mother's Little Helper. All of the women's magazines were heavily marketing amphetamines to women throughout the country. Yeah. They're absolutely miserable and just hopped up on this speed.
Now we just put them on Xanax. There's so much progress we've had. It's
Michael, the point that he's making is that they were unhappy. They were deeply, deeply unhappy. And you're trying to paint that time period as the time they were happy. Ryan's presenting to you the fact that they were not happy. And you're like, and we've made so much progress since then. You're getting blown out of the water here, man, and you don't even realize it.
It seems to me that when people say it's a paradox of declining female happiness because of all of the advantages of the women's lib, I don't think there have been advantages. I think it's robbed women of a lot of things they like. And you can see this in a debate not between conservatives, but among feminists. There's a famous debate between Betty Friedan, an American feminist, and Simone de Beauvoir, who's a French feminist and the strumpet of Jean-Paul Sartre. And they were debating whether or not women should be permitted to stay home and of Sartre, yes. They were debating whether women ought to be.
Michael Knowles feels very clever by being able to call someone from 100 years ago a slut. Like, that's the kind of guy he is. Like, he feels nothing. Like, honestly, kind of psychopathic behavior.
Permitted to stay home and keep house and raise a family. And Betty Friedan, being the American, she said, yes, of course women should have that choice, but they should also have the choice to go into the workplace if they want. And Simone de Beauvoir, who I think is a more intelligent and insightful feminist, she said, no, women cannot be given the choice to stay home, because if women are given that choice, too many of them will take it. They would prefer, most women will be inclined to do something like that, and that will inhibit women's liberation. So I take the feminists at their word. I think they really did want to weaken the family structures, diminish women's opportunities.
They wanted to weaken the structures of the family that made them patriarchal, Michael. The patriarchal aspect of the family, Michael. The aspect of the family that was embodied by a chatter we had just today, coming in, talking and bragging about how his presence made his wife and daughter flinch. That patriarchal structure, Michael. Yeah. I think that kind of deserves to go, actually.
Opportunities to stay home, to raise a family. You've seen, obviously, declining family sizes. We've now been below replacement birth rate in America since the beginning of this era, and since 1971 or so. So I don't know, it just hasn't really worked out that well. And I think people are becoming really...
I don't know if it hasn't worked out that well. It seems like a lot of people still want to come here, huh? Like, it clearly worked out well enough that people still come here. And because of our immigration rates, we're able to actually grow our population. So that actually seems like a good thing, huh?
Sad and really angry all the time. And I think anger is a consequence of sadness because people don't know how to deal with their sorrow. And so that just seems objectively true. And if things are really fraying and have been fraying over the past 50 years, it doesn't seem so crazy to me to say, hey, how about we avail ourselves of the wisdom of the ages, not the stuff that worked in the 1950s or the 1220s or whatever, but the things that have consistently worked throughout all of history. That seems like the common sense position.
Well, and so Ryan mentioned, or you mentioned Occupy Wall Street earlier, and I think, I don't want to put words in Ryan's mouth, but I think a lot of the left would posit that this decline in happiness came alongside deindustrialization and heightened predatory capitalism, essentially. And I actually think there's probably something to that. And you and I probably agree on a lot of these cultural questions, Michael. I know we agree on a lot of these cultural questions. I think people's misery and selfishness is reflected in the business community. And then I see, Donald Trump campaigning with like Elon Musk, and I think Elon Musk is amusing, but I also wonder how that's hitting people in the Rust Belt. I was at Butler when Elon Musk was there, and people were going crazy for him. They really liked him. Granted, those were people at a MAGA rally, but anyway, all that is to say, to what level do you think actually?
Granted, they were people who were complete and utter dipshits, but
predatory industrial capitalism run by, as you and I would describe them, like secular business predators, or just secular businessmen. To what role or at what level do you think that's contributed to declining happiness?
Yeah, I think Elon is sort of the exception, or he's a contrarian, which is why people who otherwise would despise these, zillionaires, people like Bill Gates, say, are applauding for him, because he's saying, look, there's something that's really gone wrong in our society, and he's trying to fix it. But I totally agree. I think there are perfectly legitimate right-wing conservative criticisms of modern capitalism. I mean, and I think Trump would make that point. I think this is why Trump also was able to bring the head of the Teamsters union over to the RNC, and have major labor unions not endorse Kamala. Kamala still has that guy who's like Tony Soprano and Archie Bunker from the Longshoremen, but she's really lost support among labor. So,
she hasn't, though. Like, that's kind of the thing, right? Like, Michael Knowles is just lying. Kamala hasn't lost support among labor.
This is a critique that's come up through Trump, but also beyond that. And what is it? Well, it's that the markets are great, and we support economic prosperity, but you can't put the cart before the horse. You have to recognize, to the point we were discussing earlier with Ryan, that there are moral considerations.
Like, I'm sorry, let's just take a look. Here are the unions that back Kamala Harris. Okay? The Actors Equity Association, AFL-CIO, New York State AFL-CIO, Amalgamated Transit Union, American Federation of Government Employees, American Federation of School Administrators, American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, American Federation of Musicians, American Federation of Teachers, American Postal Workers Union, Association of Flight Attendants, Communication Workers of America, International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees, International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, International Association of Sheet Metal, Air, Rail, and Transportation Workers, International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, International Brotherhood of Teamsters, Joint Council 28, Local 186, and Local 572, International Longshoremen, International Longshore and Warehouse Union, International Organization of Masters, Mates, and Pilots, International Union of Bricklayers and Allied Craft Workers, International Union of Elevator Constructors, International Union of Operating Engineers, International Union of Painters and Allied Trades, Laborers International Union of North America, National Education Association, National Nurses United, National Union of Healthcare Workers, North America's Building Trades Union, Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union, Seafarers International Union, Service Employees International Union, Unite Here, United Auto Workers, United Brotherhood of Carpenters and Joiners of America, United Farm Workers, United Food and Commercial Workers International, United Steelworkers, and Writers Guild of America Westpac. Like, nah, dude. Nah, dude. Anyway, yeah, no workers support Kamala Harris.
Considerations here. And if you untether the market from any moral considerations, you're going to be sunk and everybody's going to be miserable. And maybe your GDP ticks up, but it's not even reflecting economic health, because you can game the system very easily. I mean, if drug dealers are trading fentanyl or people are going to brothels, I guess that could be reflected in a higher GDP, but it doesn't mean your country is really healthier. So to the point, I think Ryan made a really good point earlier that we have to take into consideration, which is when our friend here waved the white flag on talking about later term abortion, he said, look, I just don't want to think about it. Why do I have to think about these moral questions? And the answer is, well, because you're a citizen and we're supposed to have a self-government here. And when John Adams says, the Constitution's built for moral and religious people. That's not just some nice platitude that you hear at evangelical camps and, brunches. That
evangelical camps and brunches that you hate. You're Catholic, Michael. At least I'm pretty sure he's Catholic. He's referenced evangelicals an awful lot in this conversation. Maybe he doesn't want to advertise that he's Catholic. Because the whole Christian nationalism thing doesn't really include Catholics.
he's really warning you of something. John Adams was not the most orthodox Christian.
Like, let me tell you something. Catholics and Protestants have been at war with each other for like since Martin Luther. Like, if he wants to make this unholy alliance, y'all are gonna fight as soon as you run out of like trans people to massacre or whatever.
In the world by any stretch. He was making an empirical observation that our constitutional system and
oftentimes literal warfare, Olive Ryder,
do not work if people are not constrained by morality. What could happen then is you could have something that is used for a great good, like markets, be used for terrible evil, for the exploitation of workers, which, if you're a Christian, that's one of the four sins that cries out to God for vengeance. I mean, that's a really awful and evil thing to do. People who are putting mere profits over the common good and the health of their country. That's something that the conservatives have to watch out for too. But I think really the rise of the Trump movement and populism and the MAGA movement, whatever you want to call it, over the old stale Chamber of Commerce kind of republicanism, I think it's responding to that need. And I think it's why you're seeing labor come over. I think it's why you're seeing a Kennedy, for goodness sakes, come over. I think it's why you're seeing people like Tulsi Gabbard come over. The Republicans, bizarrely, you wouldn't have predicted it 20 years ago, have become the party that are responding to the real moral crisis brought about by markets and labor.
I mean, it's just funny that Donald Trump is the guy leading that party to its, so it's moral victory. So I think
I don't know why it's funny. I really, I get it. He's lived a flamboyant life.
The guy has probably promised to pay for. I don't think he's paid for any abortions because he doesn't pay his contractors or subcontractors. Why would he actually go through on paying for an abortion? But you don't think he's like suggested to somebody that he would pay for their abortion? I mean, look at the guy. Like the guy's life is a caricature of immorality. Like it's fine. Like he can do whatever he wants. I don't care.
I don't know. I don't really speculate.
Like the idea that like this.
Oh well, I don't really speculate on his personal life.
This is the guy that would be a role model for.
Well, no,
this moral rectitude is kind of comical.
Ryan, if you were religious, you wouldn't find it comical. You might find it delightful, but you wouldn't find it comical. Because God uses
because we're talking about the soul, Ryan. We're talking about the soul, okay? The eternal soul, all right? And when you play around with sin, Ryan, your eternal soul can get used up like chewed gum. Okay, and once it's all chewed up like that, God won't want you anymore unless you accept the healing power of Jesus Christ. And, God uses all kinds of people to make his points, Ryan. He uses flawed instruments in order to do great things. The most banal platitude imaginable from Michael Knowles is about to come.
All sorts of imperfect people for his ends. If you're Christian, you certainly believe that. And so the left, ironically, I was speaking with a very close left-wing friend of mine who said she really hated Trump. And she just...
What very close left-wing friend do you have, Michael Knowles? I need names.
Is a good person, unlike Trump. And what's funny is that was Trump's answer. He says, I try to be a good person. I try not to commit sins. But of course, all sin and fall short of the glory of God. So you're speculating without any basis on all sorts of private sins that Trump in principle could have committed, even though, again, there's no evidence for it.
Unfortunately, we don't have to do as much speculation as
I mean, he's definitely an open adulterer. That much is.
He's lived a very flamboyant life, and he's done all sorts of terrible things, and he's been totally open about a lot of those things. But I suppose the point here, from my perspective as a Christian, is, Right. That is how God works. God uses flawed vessels. And believe it or not, Donald Trump, because he's had the spotlight on him for a long time, it's very easy to say he did that terrible thing and he did that awful thing and he did that evil thing. But believe it or not, Ryan, you've done very evil things too. And if you think that God can use you to do good,
Believe it or not, Michael, or believe it or not, Ryan, you're actually the devil incarnate. Did you know that? Did you know that? Did you know that you're actually like Satan in himself? But God still loves you, Ryan. He still loves you. So it's okay. Welcome, Raiders. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Howdy, folks. We are covering this delightful back and forth between Ryan Grimm and Michael Knowles, and it do be doing.
Oh geez, not Michael no less.
Two dads smooching. Thank you for the tier 1 sub. I appreciate it. And welcome, folks. My name's Riverboat Jack. I'm a socialist. I'm a trans woman. I use she, her pronouns. I talk about the news and politics. And welcome, folks. We're having a good time over here. Get cozy.
good things.
Here.
It's very easy to say he did that terrible thing and he did that awful thing and he did that evil thing. But believe it or not, Ryan, you've done very evil things too. And if you think that God can use you to do good things, if God can use me to do good things, it shouldn't be surprising that God can use Trump. But what Christian...
Okay, counterpoint though, I don't believe that God uses me to do anything. And if I don't believe in that, then then the responsibility is purely on the individual, right? Like, it's so interesting how people like Michael Knowles are all about personal responsibility until it's like one of their guys, and then it's just like, well, God uses flawed instruments to achieve perfect ends. And it's like, what about that personal responsibility though? What about that? You literally compared abortion to murder here, and like Ryan's just like, well, what if Donald Trump is a murderer in the same way that you've been talking about? And you immediately default to, well, you know, God uses imperfect vessels, which is like, what are you doing? Your entire premise is undermined by that, Michael. Did we watch the Trump rally in New York today? No, today we're doing catch up. We'll probably watch that tomorrow because we watched approximately 10 seconds of it, which was a guy calling Puerto Rico a trash island, and AOC and Governor Walz reacting to that, which was good. I'm glad we went over that, but that was about as much of that as we've covered today, and whoo boy, it's a lot.
Christians say on Easter Sunday is they say, oh, happy fault that won for us so great, so glorious a Redeemer. They actually celebrate the fall of man, the original sin, because it not that it's a good thing in itself, but it actually brought about this great glory and redemption. So I don't know.
Counterpoint. Not everyone believes that.
I think Americans like a comeback story. I think Americans like redemption and they like grace. And I think the gracelessness of the left, the total lack of charity of the left, has repelled a lot of people.
A redemption story, though, requires somebody to be seeking redemption. Is there an...
I love Ryan Grimm so much.
I know nominative determinism isn't real, but imagine attempting to get information from Michael no less.
True. Sake Tanuki, thank you for the 5 gifted tier 1 subs. And yeah, it's... Honestly, I love Ryan Grimm's approach with these far-right, like, conservative, you know, talking heads like Michael Knowles or Matt Walsh. He's just so aggressively chill, and it's so clear that they don't know how to deal with that. You know, like, Michael Knowles looks like he's on the edge of his seat every time he finishes talking to Ryan, and he's bracing himself for impact for the next thing Ryan's about to say, because Ryan's just being a very chill and, you know, inquisitive soul, and I love that about him.
Any evidence that you've
seen?
There's
a lot of evidence that Trump
is seeking redemption?
Yeah, I think so. I think he's recanted a lot of his previous views and behaviors, and I think he's owned up to being kind of a rough
Has he, though? Because I haven't seen any evidence of that whatsoever.
guy. I remember one time he was asked if he had a beer, and he said, "No, I'm the only president that's never had a beer. It's the only good thing you can say about me. Can you imagine if I had a beer? If I were a drinker, I'd be the worst." That's called humility, and I think Donald.
That's not humility, man. That's the equivalent of bragging about how humble you are. That's quite literally the equivalent of like, oh man, I'm so humble. No one's ever been as humble as me. And I'm pretty sure he's actually said that. In fact, Donald Trump, no one is more humble than me. Let's see. Here we go. Do we have the clip? It was from 60 Minutes in 2016. I want to find the video clip. Do we have it? Can I find it? Oh, God. Yep, it's from the 60s. It's from the 60 Minutes interview. Here's Philip Bump, national, Washington Post national columnist. I think I am actually humble. I think I'm much more humble than you would understand. My humbleness defies your comprehension. Essentially. Yeah, this is a guy who's really good at, recanting.
Donald Trump, ironically enough, exhibits a lot more.
Wait, did you find it, Gayfesh? Also, hello, Gayfesh. Oh, chat.
When you were in Iowa, you went to a church service. The sermon was in part on humility. What did you take away from that?
Well, they didn't really know I was coming because of security reasons, okay? And
oh my God, okay. Can I just say it's crazy how much more coherent he is compared to where he is now in 2016?
So we just sort of showed up. Maybe they changed quickly, or maybe it was coincidence, but it was actually in humility. I don't know. It was very good. It was a very nice service, beautiful church. I liked it.
But humility.
Wait, this isn't the clip? Damn it.
You're not known to be a humble man, but I wonder.
I think I am actually humble. I think I'm much more humble than you would understand.
Okay, that digging for the clip was absolutely worth it. This is great. Amazing stuff.
Humility than most people in our political class, certainly than the sanctimonious left, which ironically is totally bereft of sanctity.
Pretty sure you just said that Trump betrays a lot of humility.
I think Trump demonstrates humility. Ironically.
I mean,
a lot more than the left, yeah.
I think there is something that people miss with why Trump appeals to like normal Americans, because he is like self-deprecating.
It's his humility.
Sometimes.
It's his humility. He does make fun of himself.
Yeah. He does make fun of himself. Yeah, like he let Fallon ruffle his hair, something like that. But
God, we are still plagued by that moment. Fuck Jimmy Fallon. For like, I don't know. I was gonna say whitewashing, but let's be honest. Like Donald Trump is a white supremacist. He doesn't need any more whitewashing. Donald Trump, like, it's really, really awful that all these years later, people are still like, no, he's totally relatable. Look, see, Jimmy Fallon rustled his hair. Wow, humanizing him, or you know what? I prefer the term orange washing. There we go.
I'm curious, Ryan, what you made of Michael's answer about like essentially predatory capitalism or the excesses of it.
Yeah, there's a good book on this subject that was actually controversial among some feminists at the time by Elizabeth Warren and her daughter. Mm-hmm. You probably read it, called the two-income trap, and it was controversial because it suggested there are, like, as you said, there are some who would say no, like both parents ought to be, both parents ought to be in the workforce. Like there shouldn't be a choice necessarily, because if there is a choice, then the patriarchy is going to dominate, and the woman's going to be pushed out of that. What Elizabeth Warren pointed out in her book is that what we did is we reduced wages along the way. We drove up the cost of doing all this. We broke up families in a way that there wasn't the same help from aunts and uncles and grandmothers and grandparents in raising up families. So all of a sudden now, you have less money, less family help, and two of you are now working for the same amount of wages. And it shouldn't surprise anybody that out of that comes just complete collapse in people's happiness and well-being, even as quality.
You know, this Ryan Grimm guy, he's really cooking.
Life, by all other measures, is growing. That, you know, we're living in better houses. There's more access to food, more access to clean water, environment.
But think about that. I mean, I love this point because, yes, I agree with that analysis pretty much entirely. I just love this point where they say, yeah, so people are working all the time and they're making way less money for their work, and their families are falling apart, and they're getting married later, and they can't have kids, and they can't really do anything. But their quality of life's so much better on all the other measures. You think, well, on everything that matters, their quality.
That's literally the Republican argument. That's the Republican argument. That's your argument, man. Whenever it is pointed out that like people don't have enough free time and are too stressed out and are working too much, like inevitably a conservative's like, well, you have air conditioning and a refrigerator, so technically you are more wealthy than a medieval peasant. And it's like, oh man, I'm getting vertigo from his rhetorical gymnastics here.
Quality of life is worse. I guess now they have an iPad, so that's nice. But other than that, it looks like the quality of life is diminished.
I think the points are in concert, because what you're saying is like, despite the fact that like if you look at like an average house, just the house itself, the average house today versus the average house in 1955, like houses are much nicer, cars are much nicer, like things are much nicer. Yet people are still like suffering, you know, in a much more significant way. What I'd say is like everybody ought to be working 20 hours a week.
20?
Yeah.
20?
Yeah, let's start with 20, see how that goes. Like there's
Hell yeah, Ryan, let's go. Get paid a living wage off of 20 hours per week of work. Let's go. Unironically. That is where it should be. At least right now. I think we can do even better than 20, but you know what? Let's start with 20. Do you know how much better your quality of life would be? Like each one of you watching your life would exponentially improve if you only had 20 hours of work to do per week. You could spend more time with your family, spend more time with your friends. You could actually go out and do stuff. You could focus on your like physical health. You could do so many things.
There's not that much work to be done. We don't actually all need to be driving ourselves into the ground like.
Well, Celestial Heart, they're not talking about 20 hours a day. They're talking about 20 hours a week.
Yes. So Ryan, I actually agree. I just having worked at businesses, a number of businesses now,
I don't need 40 hours to do that job.
It was 6. Well, even.
Holy shit, that's savage, dude. Holy shit, dude. You know Michael Knowles isn't working 40 hours a week. Are you kidding me? Oh my god. And the thing is, Ryan delivers these in such a matter-of-fact tone. It can easily fly under Michael Knowles' radar.
Just 60% of the time, people are kind of just twiddling their thumbs and popping zins and like going to the coffee break. So there, yes, I agree. The question is, though, I remember when this issue came up during the Obamacare debates, Nancy Pelosi, that was Freudian slip. Nancy Pelosi was asked what people would do with all the extra time that they had now that they didn't have to work to keep their health insurance. And she said, well, you know, they can write poetry or they can go take an art class. I think,
yeah, let them do that. Yeah. Well, like, why are you saying that that's bad?
You know, actually,
that's great.
Most people are not very good poets and most people aren't that good at art. And so,
yeah, most people are not that good at art. Right, Michael? You know, most people aren't that good at art. It's true.
What the fuck, Nicole?
It's not what you think.
Not what I did. Are you fucking your brother?
No!
What? Oh, I like it when you're rough with me, pretty lady. Hmm? You asshole! Guys, quit it! This is some serious shit. You're fucking right, it's serious shit. God, I think you broke my nose. I'm gonna do fucking worse than that. What are you gonna say? I hit you because you have an incest with your sister? I'm adopted, remember? That makes it better. Guys, shut the fuck up. 30 days. Guys, we're almost there. Fuck. God, this is so gay. This is just too surreal for me.
Anyway,
The question then becomes,
you know, maybe if Michael Knowles only worked 20 hours a week, he could become a better actor.
what
Those people can play softball. They can do basket weaving. Like, they can do things that are, like, enjoyable.
What the fuck is this? Oh, that was a segment of Michael Knowles' acting reel.
And meaningful. They can volunteer.
It's an actual
what's
acting
funny
job he
is
had.
What's summing up some of our disagreement, but oddly kind of agreement, is on this point of the realignment. It used to be that the left talked about the common good, and the Republicans just talked about individualism and making money and, you know, driving up GDP. And now it seems like it's kind of flipped. You hear the Republicans, especially the conservatives and the Catholic conservatives, speaking constantly about the common good, and it's the left talking about radical individualism, to choose one's own gender, to have an abortion, to do this, to do that, to leave the family, to do whatever. And you know, I think it's important to care for the common good. And when you talk about what people would do, I think it would be nice. I think something people are yearning for is to feel like we're doing something together, that we're all kind of in it together. We have a common purpose as Americans. Barack Obama said this on the campaign trail the other day. He said, when did we become so nasty and divided? We need to be much more unified. Well, I think if you're debating which side to vote for in this election, and you rightly recognize that we're divided, we don't have common purpose, and we don't know what we're going to do, this go around, at least, it's the Republicans who are talking about the common good and a common purpose and unity. It's the Democrats who are totally ignoring.
That is absolutely not true. Michael, your candidate for president just like a day ago called for the U.S. military to be used against anyone who disagrees with him, against U.S. citizens.
That. I think you should cast your votes accordingly.
Yeah, Bernie Sanders is right, yeah. Like he talks about the common good, and in a way that is like a representative of the best values of the left.
I'll give a little credit to Bernie Sanders. A little credit to Bernie in the same way that Chesterton gave credit to George Bernard Shaw. Chesterton, a conservative Christian, was friends with George Bernard Shaw, who was an atheist socialist. And he said, George Bernard Shaw is a man with a very great heart, but his heart is in the wrong place. And that's
now, just a fun fact here, by the way. This is a tweet from yesterday. This is JD Vance saying, "What a patriot." And the post is currently unavailable, but I need to let you all know that the original post was of a Trump supporter who was approached by poll workers telling her that she couldn't wear political merchandise to vote. And in response to that, she began screaming obscenities, ripped her shirt off, and voted in her underwear. And that, I think, is really where we're at when it comes to Republicans wanting, everyone to work together.
That's what I'd say about Bernie Sanders. The man does have a great heart, and he's like kind of trying to get at something, but it's totally in the wrong place, so he ends up a commie, which is not good, because that's a pale imitation of the true common good.
And thus we have reached the impasse between Ryan Grimm and Michael Knowles.
And I Googled strumpet.
Oh, you had to Google strumpet?
I mean, I thought I kind of had heard that word before.
Deployed accurately. Strumpet. Yeah, that'll be the title of your next book, Michael.
Right.
Or new Daily Wire documentary.
My new candle.
Yeah,
I like Ryan Grimm a lot because he's talked openly about coming from like a working class background, and like sometimes it comes through in conversations like this, and I find it charming.
Not beating the charges that like the like obsession with abortion is actually about, just pushing back on feminism.
Final.
Feminism is bad. We're not pushing back on abortion because we don't like feminism. We don't like feminism in part because of abortion. They're overlapping issues, but they're different. But feminism's bad. It's made women miserable, and we should cut it out. Because the reason is it's wrong about human nature.
Well.
And Michael Knowles has such a good handling on human nature. I mean, did you see his acting reel? He understands the human spirit.
Yeah, I mean, we could do another hour on that, actually.
Yeah, might as well.
Might as well.
Couple dudes debating feminism.
Yeah,
that's what we need.
Well, what I'll do is I'll serve you guys drinks, and you guys will hash it out.
Couple dudes and Emily, and we'll figure out
lighter
feminism.
cigars.
All right.
Yeah. All right. Well, Michael Knowles, host of the Michael Knowles Show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Great to be with you both. Thank you very much.
Michael Knowles is such a demon. Anyway, a massive amount of respect for Ryan Grimm for being able to handle that so well. He did such a good job. Why is he on a news show? I don't know. Counterpoints does it sometimes. I think that like Counterpoints has kind of like a similar setup to Breaking Points, where like they have the conservative and then they have like the left-leaning person, and they both get to invite people onto the show. I think that's kind of how it goes. Anyway, we made it. We did it, folks. If you've been enjoying the show, hit the follow button, hit the subscribe button, like the YouTube stream, and please consider dropping those subs and don't knows. Because I rely on you guys to support the show. You are what allow me to get through month by month. Let's go. It's more shocking for the person who is shocking, having to deal with people who are all shocked, who normally act normal. True. Michael Knowles was giving Renfield the whole time. I liked Renfield. It was a fun movie. Hey. How we doing, folks? Hey, Sabcat. Arguments about human nature are basically always stupid. True. Because they aren't based on anything. They're based on like anecdotal like observations, and that's it. Who was the girl? She wasn't conservative, was she? Because she was clearly having none of it either. Oh, she's hella conservative, Salmon Moose. Yeah. Yeah, she's written for the Federalist, Federalist Radio Hour. She's worked with the Young American Foundation. She wrote for the Washington Examiner. Yeah, the Telegraph. She's quite conservative. Yes, I would say. Yes, she is Sagar levels of super conservative, yes. Her body language toward Knowles was hostile. I think she was trying to get out of the way from camera shots, because they usually only have a two-person show.